Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are, and welcome to today's DevOps.com program, brought to you by Techstrong, AWS, and LaunchDarkly. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting panel ahead. First, I do need to cover just a couple of housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, maybe you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, we want you to send those in to us using the Q&A tab, which can be found on the right side of the screen. That is where you'll also find the chat tab, and that's where we want you to get to know your fellow audience members. Let us know your thoughts throughout today's program, or maybe just from where you're tuning in. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around for the duration of today's program. So our topic today is observability for cloud-native progressive delivery. I'm joined by Rob John, DevOps and Cloud Evangelist at Dynatrace, and Daniel O'Brien, Ecosystem Engineer at LaunchDarkly. Rob, Daniel, thank you both so much for joining me today. Daniel, do you want to get us kicked off?
Sure. Thanks for having us, Cody. As Cody was mentioning, I'm Dan O'Brien. I'm an Ecosystem Engineer here at LaunchDarkly, so I have the pleasure of working with partners such as Dynatrace in building product integrations, and I'm looking forward to walking you through how our products work together today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Rob to intro.
That's right. Thanks everyone for joining us. Yeah, we're pretty excited. Dynatrace and LaunchDarkly have been partners. I've actually done quite a few events, and we're really excited. It's not just going to be talking; we're going to be demoing the products. So definitely stick around as we get into that. But yeah, I'm a cloud evangelist. I work a lot with our platform, work a lot with AWS, and we're really helping companies modernize their applications. So progressive delivery goes hand in hand with modernizing and using some of these advanced software delivery approaches. So yeah, let's dig in. Back to you, Dan.
Sounds good. We'll start with an overview of what feature management is, and then we'll take a look at how that interacts with observability. So feature management covers the entire release process to empower all of your company's teams to easily roll out new functionality to desired users. Notice I said desired users because you don't always want to roll all of your functionality out to all of your users. Our goal at LaunchDarkly is to free your engineering team to deliver code at their pace while retaining the full control of when those features are turned on for your end users. What makes feature management platforms exciting to me is how foundational it is to delivering software and how it interconnects with all the different tools your teams are currently using today. LaunchDarkly integrates with your developers' IDEs. It services events and observability platforms such as Dynatrace, and you can interact with feature flags directly in tools such as Slack. It allows you to build standardized release processes to cover any governance and compliance needs. So every team can do fast releases if they ignore the safety rails, and if you don't mind being paged and dealing with issues constantly. Personally, I don't want to be one of those teams. I want to be on a team that cares about doing releases fast and safe. When every release is contained in a feature flag, your teams can release often and confidently, knowing that they can control the blast radius and roll back when things go wrong. For most teams, releasing is a stressful event when you're releasing multiple features at once, and you just end up hoping that none go wrong. With feature management, you can build workflows that match your needs and end up having control over releasing a single feature at a time. Those workflows can include requesting approval from either a team lead, a manager, or a coworker, and doing progressive percentage-based rollouts in your own fashion. LaunchDarkly allows teams to create workflow templates and offers leading role-based access control. Standardizing processes across all of your teams with LaunchDarkly allows you to maintain, as you're saying, those governance and compliance at scale. As I was just mentioning with standardizing release processes, I love this quote. We worked with Dave and his team at iCIMS to realize this new capability. No longer was our engineering team constrained by the business because of some slower moving enterprise customers. Now engineering could move as fast as they could deliver the software, and when to release that software was no longer in their domain. That was handed over to the business. Now it was already up and running in that environment. Let's talk over a couple use cases. The first one being product optimization. LaunchDarkly helps unify engineering and business efforts to measure and accelerate your company delivering value to your end users. By giving teams a common interface for functionality, there's no more throwing things back and forth over the wall to the other department. Teams can collaborate on the implementation and rollout of features. Letting product managers and other business stakeholders have more control over releases such as beta tests and to shorten the feedback loops. They don't need to file a ticket with DevOps or the release team for every single update. With our audit log and custom roles, they can safely enable those features themselves. LaunchDarkly lets you personalize the end user's experience with complete control wherever you add that feature flag into your code. With feature flags at the core, experimenting becomes easy and powerful, bringing siloed teams together to run more experiments, run better experiments, and get those results faster. Now, let's take another look at another use case for app modernization. Whether you're moving to the public cloud or architecting or rewriting your applications, LaunchDarkly can help you do that in a safe and efficient manner. By rolling out usage of new infrastructure or services to your users incrementally, you can validate performance every step of the way to ensure that successful migration. LaunchDarkly, in the case of a migration-related error, lets you instantly route that traffic back to the original system within 200 milliseconds without customer impact. And lastly, LaunchDarkly provides a means for quickly adopting and testing these new platforms for either internal users or external users to ensure efficiency and performance overall. At LaunchDarkly, we've made sure that our product integrates neatly with all the tools in your software development lifecycle, so you can launch software faster and with more confidence. We have over 50 different integrations into those tools such as issue tracking, application performance monitoring, CI/CD, and many others. And today we're excited to have our partner Dynatrace here to present. And with that, I'll hand it over to Rob.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, and I think all those use cases we're going to dig into a little bit more. And I just before we get into some of the details around how Dynatrace works and integrates, just if you haven't heard about Dynatrace, here's a kind of a fact sheet on us. We've been in the observability space, been a top leader, recognized by analyst firms like Gartner Magic Quadrant, 11 years in a row. We're really a leader across application performance monitoring, infrastructure, end user experience. So being able to observe and validate those changes that Dan was talking about, whether it's an infrastructure related change or a customer facing application, really observability is key to all that, because our mission is that all of software works perfectly every time. And we're trying to ensure that these digital interactions are flawless and secure. And as we get into the Dynatrace platform, it's about getting answers from data. So the platform, I guess one message I'll say for this slide is, Dynatrace is not a tool. It's really a platform that has a number of technologies, from collecting the data, storing the data, doing distributed traces, doing an automatic topology of the environment. So we've been doing this at scale for quite a long time. As you saw from that enterprise list of customers, we want complex challenges. We want and can handle the volumes related to thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of hosts. And as we're doing this modernization and push to the cloud, it's the growth is just astounding. So the amount of data, the amount of complexity. Now you add in the different transaction level features, flags as part of these transactions. You really need something to help centralize that information, have the different views for the different stakeholders. And then really what we're doing on top of this, and we'll demonstrate this, is an AI engine that's really purpose built for managing what is normal, what is the normal behavior of your end users, what is the normal health of the transactions, then automatically detecting these problems, and then putting it together into a cause and effect, so we can reduce the mean time to identification of problems, and then ultimately the resolution. And we're going to get into that with our demo of how we can use automation to do auto remediations of problems. If we detect a problem, we want to automate that in a remediated way, so that just to kind of a little step back in observability. This is a word that you've heard in the industry. Oftentimes you might have heard the term, the 3 pillars of observability, which are kind of on this diagram, the top row of traces, metrics, and logs. And that is the foundational set of data for all IT systems, right? So, but what's missing in most systems is that the correlation and the relationship and the context of this thing. So that middle row in the diagram there it's important to add the topology. What is, say we'll take an example of a Kubernetes. There's a cluster and there's workloads and then there's pods and they're talking to microservices, and some could be on-prem and some could be, distributed to a Lambda function. We can have, so knowing the topology, knowing the relationships, seeing what's happening in the code, which is where kind of the feature flags come in, and also giving context to the things that are happening. So when we turn a flag on or make a release or change software or do upgrades, all those kind of events, all those behavior, it's important to have that rich context of what's happening, across the full stack of your application and end to end across the transactions and the user interactions. And then the way we make it open is really this bottom layer. So what we're going to see today is the use of APIs. LaunchDarkly has APIs to set, configure, enable, to kill switches. Same with Dynatrace. We have the ability to ingest events, perform configuration as code, bring in data, ingest logs. And we also embrace a lot of the open standards that are being developed, like open telemetry is a highly evolving standard with metrics, traces, and logs. So we natively do that. We natively contribute to those initiatives. And it's all about automation, which we're going to get into too. So, and as I was mentioned, we have quite a few large customers. This is just one as an example. And the Dish Networks is a very large, they service 12 million customers. They're huge. And like a lot of other industries, they're going through a digital transformation. They're going from their traditional business to an IoT kind of driven set of services for wireless. So what they had is a very complex cloud environment, a lot of relationships between applications and systems, and they needed to get, a handle on what that topology looked like, but also get into resolving issues as they came up. And so, this is a little testament of just sort of how AI really helped them do that, and just really, reducing the number of tools, reducing the number of people that need to get together to kind of to look at the problems. And so this is just one little example. And we have a case study. We could put a little a link about that. But if they step back, everyone has the same goal. We want to deliver, and this is what Dan was talking about, where we want to do this delivery of features faster and more frequently. Whether that so traditionally it may have just been a new release. We have to release the code, but now with feature flags, we could do it even faster. We could do it more targeted. We could do it with experiments. And so this is really what the progressive delivery approach is about: is doing things faster, frequently. But we can't sacrifice the quality. And I think Dan actually said it. We need to have it under control. We need to manage the risks. And one way is, having a smaller group of people rolling it out in phases. But key to that is really having observability, on the health of the users, on the infrastructure, on the behavior. And so we need to ensure these types of topics. And I think we'll demo some of these, but it's really, as we roll out a feature, whether it's a critical feature or a nice to have feature, think of a Black Friday and I want to do a customer survey. If that's bogging down my system, I want to know that. And if it's not critical, then I can flip the flag off and say, all right, let's just take away that, because it's critical that they buy the product is more important than they maybe fill the survey or get recommendations about the product, as an example. And then, people are testing things under high volume, and what we're seeing now more and more is there's no other place like production to get real volume, real activity. So if we're doing those types of either performance testing and regressions before it goes to prod, or once it's in production, knowing the performance, which usually comes in the form of service levels. So we're trying to manage and monitor the service levels, whether it's at an individual microservice level or a shared API across companies, or an end user business kind of service level. We need to ensure that, and that's a critical part. And then, as we talked about earlier, like with the Dish example, really when there is a problem, we need to identify it quickly. Is it the result of the database? Is it the network? Or did the feature flag, open up a new code path that we didn't test properly, and that caused a bunch of problems? So where is the problem, right? What is the right team? And then keeping this all in sync, is critical. So if we made a change, we need to inform and kind of, propagate and federalize that information, and that's really helps ensure that progressive delivery is successful. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that before. Where do we start, Dan? But that's kind of where we're going with all this, because where do we start? So when it comes to feature flags, certainly Dan could talk about how you implement the flag, but from from the observability standpoint, we want to have this insight on, and here's a screenshot. We'll do some of these live demos. This is the Dynatrace web UI, where we could see transactions taking place and being able to segment, this is the behavior, and you can see the top right, whether it's response time or failure rates or amount of traffic or queuing. These are the kind of the dimensions you can slice and dice, if you will, the behavior of in these transactions that are taking place. So having insights is really the first thing. I need to observe it in order to manage it. That's kind of the philosophy there. And if we can roll it up, so these are just some capabilities in Dynatrace. So it's certainly a low-level transaction, microservice level, but it's also bringing things up into like these service levels or business value kind of impact. So if we're doing a conversion or like a funnel for like checking out of a cart, right, or maybe some sort of process, there's different stages on it. So if we could see, this is the expected behavior, we wanted to have, a shorter and a higher conversion rate because we've turned on a set of features that make that workflow, we think, easier for the customer to go through and get to the completion. So that's kind of that experiment Dan's talking about. So you couple the flags and those goals and those targeted groups, but then you need to observe, like, did they convert faster or not, or did it get worse? And so this sort of insight is also critical, and that's really helps the product owners, because we're trying to elevate up these insights, right? It's not just the IT folk, it's the product owners, it's the business folks, and they're the ones making the decisions ultimately whether this is a good to go based on their KPIs, in many cases. So, and I'll demo this, but I just wanted to just highlight, one part of Dynatrace. So once we'll show it, and it might make more sense, but when we gather all this data into a big data store of Dynatrace, we have a purpose-built topology model, and all of these metrics and traces and logs get layered on top, and the relationships between applications and users and infrastructure are all interconnected because of our purpose-built data model. So if you were to try to do this on your own, this is where we always say it takes a big war room and everyone looking at their little silo tool. The database guy's looking at the database thing, the web analyst is looking at the web access logs or whatever, right? So we're like, what changed? So this is the idea. It looks simple, but there's a lot, if you try to do this on your own, to try to bring in together an aggregated view of a problem, who's it impacting? How can I prioritize it? Is it related to, and then ultimately the root cause, like if we could say the root cause of all these symptoms is this one little thing, or the flag that just got turned on, then we can identify that quickly through AI, and then we can resolve it fast as well. So that's kind of where we're going to demo some of these things today too. So maybe a good segue to demos. So what we prepared for the demo, and so Dan and I are going to talk about, within LaunchDarkly, the web UI, you'll get to see that, and he'll share some of the features of that, and likewise at Dynatrace. But for a demo, I have a very simple application. It's actually deployed out in Kubernetes. So each of these little squares represents the services that are within the sample app. There's a front end, there's a couple back end services. And what I've done is instrumented one of these services with the LaunchDarkly SDK, and now Dynatrace is monitoring it. And so what we're going to do is change a flag, and I have built into this application a couple like kind of time bombs, if you will. One's going to force a response time problem. One is going to generate errors by changing the flag. So it's like you'll turn on the errors, turn off the errors, turn on the response time problem, turn off the response time problem. That's what I'm going to demo. So hopefully you'll get the idea of the mechanics and through a simple example. But then we're going to take it a little step further, and Dan can talk. I'll say what this is, and maybe Dan, you just want to elaborate a little bit on this. But within LaunchDarkly, we were mentioning there are APIs. There's also a way to generate an endpoint, which is called the flag trigger in LaunchDarkly terminology, to be able to turn on and off the flag. So by virtue of just calling this endpoint, I can basically effectively do a kill switch. So if you look at the title of our slide, we are calling this a kill switch demo. So what's going to happen is Dynatrace is going to detect a problem, get to the root cause of the issue, kill switch to turn off the behavior. And then if all goes well, we'll see, we will get back to a healthy state in our environment, and then we'll see auditing along the way too. So I don't know, Dan, if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. So the flag trigger in that case is a single URL that you can get and work with observability tools such as Dynatrace that when that API endpoint is called, it does one specific action. So in this case, it'll turn the feature flag off. Because you don't want kind of flapping alerts in most cases. For this use case, we suggest that you take one specific action there. And we'll kind of walk through that as we go into the demo. But this means your team doesn't have to be hands-on keyboard immediately responding to things. If you know this feature flag is associated to this alert, that can all be taken care of for you automatically.
Right. And I think once you see it, you'll get it right away. So sometimes seeing it is worth 5 pages of documentation. So so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, and I'll walk you through. So remember that picture. There's a front end service and 3 back end services. And so let me go ahead and share my screen now. And so just first of all, show you that I have this running application. And by the way, we can. This is just a project I have out in my repo on GitHub. So if anyone wants to try to run this app on their own, they're totally welcome to. But basically, this is what the front end application looks like. So you can see there's, it's very simple. There's a customer view, and you can edit a customer list, and I can have a catalog of items, and I can. Basically that's what the app does. You can search for things, you can place an order. So what I have is the application is running, and what also is running is an automatic load generator. So Dynatrace, in order to see things, if you will, needs traffic hitting the website. So me just clicking around is not enough really for Dynatrace to have meaningful data. So behind the scenes, I have a JMeter script running, and it's basically, calling all these URLs that you see here. So that's just sort of my setup. And what I'll do, and I'll jump to you in a second, Dan, but what we have on the Dynatrace side, so here, and it will be in this a bit too. So now I'm in the Dynatrace web interface. So Dynatrace is offered as a SaaS. And so if you were to sign up for the trial, for example, you would have this full-fledged environment as you see here. So the way we're structured is we have kind of a large menu of things you can see on the left. And then we're kind of in the main view. I'm going to hide the menu for most of the demo, but just to show you that's the web UI for Dynatrace. And you can see we have a specific page that's related to Kubernetes. I know some of you guys may know this, but think it's really just a containerized application. So each of those services that map to that square, you can see in this view here. And so when we look in Dynatrace, and I'll just kind of click into a service, how Dynatrace sees services represents our, the transactions that are hitting our website. So if we were to go into, you can see high level metrics around response time, failure rate, throughput, but let me just click into the view. So what Dynatrace is giving you as it's monitoring the system is, as you'd expect, a lot of time series data around, in this case, the services. And these, if you remember me clicking around the web UI, these are all the different URLs that were being hit, by that load generator tool. So we can see, and we'll come back to the screen a bit. That's why I'm showing it to you now. So we have failure rates. So right now we have a 0% failure rate, which is good. And our response time on average is kind of hovering, kind of in the millisecond range, as you can see here. So that's really, I'll just kind of stop there. And then I'm going to flip over to the LaunchDarkly web UI, and I'll click, but Dan, if you want to guide me through.
Sure. And what you're seeing here on the screen right now is our overall project, our overall list of all the feature flags in a project. So you can see the list where you have a feature flag name. Then we have a lot of metadata around that feature flag, such as how long ago it was created, who the maintainer is. So from working with our customers, we found that the feature flag itself is important, but all of that information around the feature flag and its usage is just as important. And that's why over on the right-hand side, you can see information such as it was evaluated 3 seconds ago, which variation is being served in this environment, and also when was the last time that the targeting was modified. So at just a glance, you can get all this information. And we won't jump into it right now, but on the left-hand side, you can just see some things where like users are who's been evaluated by feature flags, and segments are groups of users that you can use in feature flag targeting. And then there's other use cases that can be talked through. But this is kind of what we'll focus on here is the initial feature flags themselves.
Very simple setup. Oh, I'm sorry, Dan. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when you think about, like in our demo app, I have two features, right? Two little flags. So it's pretty simple app. But where the value of a flag management platform comes into play is when I have teams of many applications and many teams that are incorporating flags into it. So there's a flag management of the life cycle of the flag, being able to know how they're being used, being able to age out the flags once they stop being used. And so I think we're gonna just kind of go through kind of a basic, almost like a hello world example, but that's really, there's a lot that's where the platform, just like Dynatrace, like it's really it's when you start really scaling that these features are critical to managing at scale.
Absolutely.
Right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you what I'm doing here is I'm just going to turn this flag on, which is going to, as you can see here, by turning this on, my customer list function is going to have a 2-second delay. And I'm going to click into the flag itself so you can see what it's kind of doing here. And maybe, Dan, you want to talk about this a little bit.
In this specific page, you have the flag targeting. So this is everything that affects that flag. In this case, there's only a default rule, and that means there's no specific user targeting going on. It's just splitting it by a percentage rollout. So in this case, half of the users will get the true variation, so the feature will be on for them, and the other half will get the false variation. You have full control over whether users are served an individual variation or, as in this case, that percentage rollout. So now we can kind of take a look at how that works.
Right. And so you can see here, we've there's a lot more advanced features here, but basically I've now, if I go back to the summary page, I have turned on this flag, and what we should see on the Dynatrace side. So I'm going to jump into, because we know this is affecting our customer list. And I'll just show you what happened on Dynatrace side. So the way we can see what we call a service flow in Dynatrace is just by installing our one agent into the Kubernetes cluster. And again, if your compute is running on virtual machines or EC2 instances or Azure VMs or VMware, the same agent technology is getting this full stack of observability and getting the distributed traces, which allows us to build automatically these types of flows. So this flow of view here is a built-in feature that would be lit up automatically just by virtue of installing the agent. So we could see that our front-end service is calling, like you saw in that PowerPoint slide, an order customer catalog. But now we can see that there's other types of call flows taking place. So my order service is also calling the customer service and calling an order database. The order service is also calling the catalog service, who in turn is calling the catalog thing, and so on. So customer calls a customer database. So automatically we got this pretty nice view of things, and we can see things like the response time and where time is being spent. So even at a quick glance, we could see, in the course of a flow, that where's my time being spent? Very little is being spent in a database, and we get this kind of breakdown here. We can also see a throughput kind of view or perspective of where are my requests going. So just from my load runner script, I'm doing more things, or more requests are being sent to the order service as relative to the customer service, and so on. This type of breakdown is helpful for decisions of like moving things to the cloud, understanding the dependencies, modernizing apps. Some people say, hey, you know what? I can have some cost savings. It's very low volume, or maybe very high volume, and I want to refactor this whole thing into a Lambda function, for example.
Which is exactly where feature flags can help.
Exactly right. And that's where the flag could be, hey, and I think, Dan, you had that in your slide, like, let's turn on the front end service to go through the code path to our old database and have a subset go to the new flow to a Lambda function. We're making that one up, right? So it's not just end user features that you're using flags for. It could be used in routing, of the call flows themselves.
Yeah, we see that a lot with that modernization.
Yep. And so let me go, I'm going to jump into just kind of now, since I know, we know the app a bit. And now I'm this way. I'm going to jump into I meant to jump into the customer service. I clicked on the database by accident. And so what we can see here, let me go to the dynamic request. So by turning on that flag, I'm going to change my time frame here. What we should see, if the demo is going right, that we should now start seeing more, and I'm going to filter on the customer list because that was the feature that we knew we were slowing down. So you can see here by turning on the flag, we know that this customer list is being impacted, because of just by turning on that feature flag. So now we see that, I'm having a problem. And what Dynatrace has automatically done is, we see a response time degradation. And so now we can go into the problem screen I was mentioning. So this will look kind of simple because we have the simple app at the moment. But what's starting to happen is, Dynatrace goes through a life cycle of detecting problems. And so when Dynatrace uses its AI, it's not saying, oh, my CPU is high, let me send you an alert. And then some team gets paged on, oh, my CPU is high. And that's the problem. Like, I have no context for high CPU, or I have no details on why this page is slow. So that's what happens in traditional monitoring. Like I have an alert on my web page being slow. I have an alert on my database. I have an alert here and there, and everyone has to try to make sense of it all. So what's happening here is Dynatrace has started to open up this problem window, and it's been open. And as it starts to, process and analyze, and Davis is the name of our AI engine, as a side note, it's starting to analyze these relationships to get to the root cause of this particular problem. So we're going to let it manifest for a minute, but I'm just going to jump into one other feature, which is part of the LaunchDarkly integration. So back on the customer, back on the customer service again, if you will. And if you notice down here, we have a set of events that are taking place and being captured in Dynatrace. So I'll leave this, I'll leave it there so you can read it. But what happened through the LaunchDarkly integration, by me flipping the flag, and you can see here, action was I turned it on. And you can see, it automatically, I did it because I was logged into the LaunchDarkly UI. So I got audited there. How about that? So here I am. So there's a lot of information right away that, at this time frame, there was a configuration change. So if you're starting to see that, a response time problem, you can look right at some of the events that are taking place and say, why did Rob do that? or who's the owner of this flag? Let's go understand what's happening and dig in deeper.
And
so
I
what
think
will
this,
happen
Rob, this goes back to what you were mentioning with all the context kind of at your fingertips.
Yep.
So now it's not just these independent systems, but when you toggle that feature flag, you can have it show up in Dynatrace. So it's all there just for you to review.
Exactly. So now I went back. So I know I'm flipping, but I think everyone's following. But here you can see now I went back to that same problem. And because it's now kind of finished its analysis, it's been open for 4 minutes. Now it populated a lot of this other information, like, in my case, my one user is my JMeter script. So I don't really have a lot of users, but you could see, if imagine there was real users coming into it, we would be able to see, how many users are impacted, what was the services and how are they coming in? In this case, one service is impacted, and we have more insights now in the context of this. So if I was more on the, DevOps or infrastructure side, I immediately know that this service is hosted on this Kubernetes cluster in this namespace. It's related to this workload. We can see the degradation event. And we can see that it automatically linked in, not saying that it's not saying that the configuration change was the root cause. It's just saying, hey, in the root cause service in this time frame has these associated events. So the more you tell Dynatrace around the context, whether this is production or non-production, these events are taking place, the more you can really get to the root cause of the problems. So yeah, so that's pretty cool. So then the automatic part of response time, we'll dig into this problem, then we'll turn it off, is when there's failure rates or response time problems, there's a whole slew of different types of problems. What will happen is it saves you time because it's going to do this automatic analysis of it. So I'd be having a problem here in my company network. But as soon as this comes up, I'll do that. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Come on. This is the power of live demos.
They always keep it interesting.
Always keep it interesting. So let me go back to the problem. Maybe just click the button again. Right. So what this is going to do is come up and here we go. This is what sorry about that delay. But what you can see here, this is an automatic analysis that Dynatrace did because, in the category of response times problems, we just know from experience, we're experts in this field that, it's in these categories of problems. Was there, I'm interacting with an external service, or I'm dealing with a queue and the queue has a queue length that's backed up, or was there a database, a bunch of SQL statements that were really causing it slow, or individual SQL statements, or in this case, it's code. So service execution means code. And then as you notice, as I click on these things, it's breaking down, the sub type. So here, the bulk of my time was waiting. And so why was it waiting? Good question. So let's look at the method hotspot. So now we have this insight into actually what was running in the code. So this was a Java Spring Boot application I wrote, and you can get insights at an aggregate level. And as you go down this list, you can see, makes sense, I'm on the customer list. And what is it doing? And you can see here, I actually have a method. Again, this is my time bomb. I have a method in there called slow me down. And how am I slowing it down? I'm doing the proverbial, thread.sleep. So there you go. So now just see how quickly I found that problem. Dynatrace detected a slowdown. It pinpointed the exact service that was of issue. We can drill into the code. And now with 2 clicks, I'm drilling down to the line of code that Dynatrace is saying, you know what, you really got to look at this. And so think of how quickly that could be resolved. So again, the remediation maybe turn the flag off. So now we could fix the code, redeploy the code, return on the flag. But this is, kind of showing a workflow that, support could do. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Dan, but that's sort of kind of showing that in action.
Nothing other than it looks really powerful.
Okay.
That was easy to go through and find.
All right. So I'm going to turn on our other pattern. So I'll do it real quick. But this one is, so what we did here is I turned off this flag and now I turned on this other flag. And so what we're going to expect here is I'm going to get failure rates, which will be a different type of problem that Dynatrace could pick up. And let me go into it. And maybe Dan, you can talk about this very simple rule.
Sure. We can see kind of compared to the last flag when we were looking at the percentage rollouts that half the traffic was going to false and half the traffic was going to true. In this case, our rules are evaluated from top to bottom. And when there's no rules, they hit that default rule. And that default rule is just saying, turn the feature on. So this is the same as releasing the feature out to everyone. There's kind of no progressive percentage rollout or anything. It's just the feature is on and everyone has access to it.
That's right. And that's where, there are a lot of, there's a lot of advanced, rules in here.
Yeah,
so I think you'll have to talk to Dan about, all the different features. But like you said, so when it's on, it's true. When it's off, it's false. So that's basically all you need to remember. And what I'll do is, but because we're going to demo 2 things, this is a good chance to talk about the flag trigger. Because if you remember what we want to do in this case, I'm going to have a failure rate of, I can't. So if I go back to my app, actually, let me go back to my app. If I click on my customer page, right before, remember this showed a list of customers, remember? And so now by hitting this page, I'm getting, a service unavailable. It is broken. So this is what an end user would experience by turning on. So the other functions work fine, but it's just this specific customer list, which is what would show up here, is broken. And I'll just show you real quick. This is how fast it is. Watch this. If I turn this thing off and save it, I go back here, refresh it. Now I'm back. Look at that. Like, that's how quick it is. I don't know if you said it was like milliseconds.
Less than 200 milliseconds.
That's how quick it is. So let me turn it back on because I want the problem to happen. So if I refresh my page, I'm broken again. So in my code, I blow it up. If it's false, it behaves normally. So that's what it hit here. And it'll just maybe show you what it's doing from an audit. You can see, I don't know if you want to talk to this, Dan. I'll leave you.
Sure. So the audit log is a change log of everything that's happening to any resource in LaunchDarkly. In this case, it's scoped down to looking at the history for this specific feature flag, but you can see every time that Rob previously turned a flag off, then turned it back on, and even when the trigger was previously run. So you can get additional information at your fingertips just by looking at that history. So anything any team member does is all captured there.
Yeah, so maybe we'll talk about that trigger. Good segue. So you can see I have one, but I'll just add one for demo purposes. But here, why don't you walk them through this, Dan?
Sure. So when you click on select the trigger type, you can select Dynatrace. And then here you have an option for an action. And this is where I was saying earlier that you can do one specific action with this URL. You can either turn it off or on. So with this dropdown, exactly, you can then select which action you want to take. And as soon as you save the trigger, you'll get a unguessable URL that you can then use to call at any point. And this is what you would add into Dynatrace or any tooling to then make that post request. And it will take that specific action that you set.
All right, so I'm going to kill it. So I just don't mess up my demo here. But yes, that's what I'm saying, right? So this allows you to automate. No, so again, so we're going to show a use case where Dynatrace is going to call this URL to automatically turn the flag off. But there may be other tools that you use. So we see a lot of customers, they may open up, upon a problem for tracking purpose. It may be a Jira ticket, a PagerDuty incident, a ServiceNow ticket. And then that in turn may drive some automated workflow. And then one of those automated workflows, may have an approval or have a non-approval to then actually perform the step of flipping the flag off. So in our case, we're just going to let Dynatrace detect it and automatically kill it. So it's kind of, it'll be really fast. It's something we won't even see. It'll happen so fast, and we'll look at the audit trail.
And isn't that what we're all aiming for, that automated remediation? Exactly
right. So here, if I look on my, so let's see if it's started to detect the problem here. So I'm gonna go back to my problem page. So what we just did is it's starting to pick up that there's a failure rate increase taking place. And what happens in Dynatrace now? This is Dynatrace, when sometimes during its life cycle, may see multiple services impacted, and then it will, as it does its thing, it will merge them together into a common problem. Say, oh, these are related problems. I'm automatically going to group them together. So you can see here, the response time get grouped. So if we wait enough, these should group together. But let's go ahead and take a look at our customer service and drill into it and see what we're seeing on here. So at the summary, we can already see, I'm violating a threshold of failure rates. So if I click into my failure rate screen, so before, if you remember, we were looking at response time and for that particular list method. So if we were to say the last 30 minutes, so just to kind of show you the two behaviors we've simulated here. One was when we turned that first feature flag on, we had this response time of that request. 50% of the requests were like 2 seconds, right? Then we turned it off and the problem got detected to go away and the problem automatically closed. So in this failure rate, we turned on that other feature, and now we're getting this high failure rate of behavior, and that's what we expected. So we can so what we'll see, I programmed it where it will automatically close the issue. I think I made it wait like 2 minutes, so we have to make really a minute for the automation to kind of force it to close. But let me go back to this service again and show you some of this analysis stuff that I showed in the PowerPoint. So one of the things that we've done, one of the features of Dynatrace for analysis purposes is it's actually just called the multi-dimensional analysis. So if I wanted to do ad hoc queries of what's happening, and what we can do is have a way to look at these types of metrics, different types of aggregations. I can filter on my list URL for this particular service. And now I want to split it, or, if you're familiar with like SQL, it's like a group by the request name and the feature flag setting. So you can see here that list. We had the code path. Again, I didn't instrument everything, but so the reasons this is missing because some of the requests went through a code path from another part of the app. But as far as but just bear with me that if we can see the true and false flag settings here, and we can see this behavior. So if we want the yellow, it's really small. It's like in milliseconds. Here is my 2 second for that when the flag is on, right? So there's my behavioral difference between feature on, feature off. And then the other view I made just for the demo here was that failure rate view. So the nice to have feature was a failure rate problem. And so I'm breaking, you can see error counts as seen by the caller, give me a count, group it by that feature, and we can see true and false. And we can see, in this case, the way it's programmed is every request is going to fail. So you can see over here, all the requests pass, or had 0 errors. And then here, what's been happening now that we turned the problem on is every request is failing, and that's bad. So that's just kind of showing you kind of a way to kind of slice and dice the data. Let's see if our problem went away. Yep. So here we go. So now, since I'm talking, if you notice the failure rate stopped. So why did that happen? Why did that happen? That happened because, if we go back to our events, you can see here that so we've done some changes to our flag. So here I turned the flag on from the web UI, and here, it hasn't kicked in yet. But here, what we'll see is when LaunchDarkly, when we called the flag trigger, let me go back to LaunchDarkly, see if it happened.
I was going to say, let's take a look at the
audit. So LaunchDarkly, now we have it turned off. And now if we look at the history in LaunchDarkly, here we go. So this is now the audit, right? So you can see actually when I deleted that one. So I turned on the flag. This was my experiment of making a trigger, deleting it just for demo purposes. But here you can see Dynatrace, when it had that problem, it detected the failure rate increase, automatically called the flag trigger on the LaunchDarkly side, and now we can see an audit that you can see right here, turned it off, and that remediated our problem. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and having all that additional information in the LaunchDarkly audit log, even to be able to jump right into Dynatrace, to me, just makes it all the better that you don't even have to kind of correlate it yourself. If you're looking in either tool, you can find that association.
Exactly right. Right. So that, I think what I'm going to do is, just for sake of time, we'll just come back to our slides real quick, and then be able to, if there's any questions that people had, we can answer those now. So let me go back to our slide deck. So I'll just advance this to the next slide. So I'll recap this one, then you can do the next one. How's that?
Sure.
So this one we kind of talked about on Dynatrace. So Dynatrace has an API where you can send in these generic events. We have different event types: configuration change, deployment events. So you can categorize these different event types. Since it's a config change, we made it a config type. And then what LaunchDarkly did is built into their platform sort of an out-of-the-box integration. So you just say, when this flag takes place, we want to automatically send the event to Dynatrace, and then all this is out of the box. You don't have to do anything, and that's pretty slick. And then flag triggers.
Yeah, and then flag triggers is what we were just looking at previously, that it enables you to instantly take an action with a flag, whether that's turning the flag on or off in either case. Where we see a lot of customers using it today is actually with, if you have, for instance, legacy code that your team isn't quite going to spend the time on refactoring right then, but you know how to remediate it, that's a great use case for having an alert and a flag trigger. You know what the action is after, and that gives the full control to your team. So this kind of provides that full cycle between Dynatrace and LaunchDarkly.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that I actually was at, I was in at a LaunchDarkly event and listening to customers, and one kind of cool use case. So in our case, we were turning off something because it broke something. But the inverse, I heard a really cool use case. There was one of your retail customers that has Kubernetes clusters in the retail stores. And what they did was, when a problem was detected, they used a flag to increase the logging levels.
I love operational
And
use
I love
cases
that one.
like
So it was
that.
like an operational use case. So here's like, hey, we got a problem. We need to collect more data on what's happening, because we don't want all this extra logs when it's healthy and normal. But what's the first, problem occurs? So that's another use case. But it just, so when you start thinking about flags, there's like turn stuff off because it's broken, but it could be turn stuff on, or do flags to route things. It could be a high volume and we want to redirect it to something else. I don't know. There's a lot, I don't know.
Well, and that couple minutes that it takes between automatically turning it on and having an operator go in and toggle it is huge in how long it takes you to remediate something, because some problems kind of disappear.
Right. And that's right. I mean, I think, you guys have some other, integrations to other tools. So we didn't, we're here to kind of about Dynatrace, but, like as you showed in your infinity symbol, both of us are working in an ecosystem. We're not a tool in isolation. So there's, tools like for instant messaging, platforms, whether it's Teams or Slack or whatever you use, or different ticketing systems that need to audit this for change control, or just sort of incident management, auditing, et cetera. But yeah, so I guess maybe just for the recap here, I think on the Dynatrace side, I mean, hopefully we've demonstrated, something that you may want to give a try, right? We're powering modernization through observability from what you saw, end-to-end tracing. We didn't get in so much into the end user behavior, but that's a really big part of what's happening in the browser as they're clicking through things, seeing what's on the client side versus on the back end calls. Hopefully we showed a good insight into being able to see the behavior of feature flags as they come into Dynatrace, both their state as well as being able to segment and analyze the transactions. And then, really service level management, which we didn't demo so much today, but that's all these metrics and all this data are often constructed into operational, metrics that are on dashboards to say, what's the health of my system overall for some time frame, sort of longer time frame, like a month. And then we get a little bit into the AI, but hopefully you got some idea where that, by identifying the impact and the root cause is, the front end part of identifying the problem, and then hopefully ultimately the remediation of the problem.
And on the LaunchDarkly side, today we kind of showed when you're moving fast, what can happen, because when things break, it kind of makes for the better demo to be able to remediate it. But when LaunchDarkly is working as well as possible with your team too, it should disappear in the sense of your team is just delivering software faster and safer overall. And then along with that, it gives you the ability to experiment more with those new features. So you can do more, for example, like A/B testing on, are these features valuable to your customers or not? So it allows you to release those features in a more agile way. And then, as Rob was mentioning at the end, actually one of my favorite use cases is also for operational use cases of feature flags. So that we see a lot of customers get to after they kind of start with the progressive releases, and then they go into full operational use cases there.
That's right. Yeah. So I think, to summarize, it's like, LaunchDarkly is going to help you deliver it faster, and we're here to help you do it safely. So
exactly.
So it's really, that's why we call it the safety net. So it's like you want to deliver, not have quality problems and customer impact. So Cody, I don't know if you wanted to.
I can actually jump over to. I see we have a couple of the.
Oh, great.
Question and answers. I think the first one is for you. Let me take a look here. What does digital transformation really mean to folks using Dynatrace, and how has that changed?
Yeah, I mean, this is a broad term that you guys, if you read white papers or go to big shows like AWS reInvent. I mean, digital transformation is just a broad theme that more and more companies are, they're companies based on technology, right? So there really is there's no industry, there's nobody that's not advancing to make their business driven by IT. I mean, obviously, COVID, working from home, changed a lot, right? So, changed our shopping patterns. If you look at the stock market in the last couple of days, I'm sure everyone's actively looking at their stocks, and mortgage rates. So like everything is in need, and we're all expecting, these flawless transactions that work perfectly. So the pressure is on IT teams to be able to deliver what's being expected, deliver those features faster. And so it's rapidly changing. So and every industry has to, evaluate these, ways to modernize their apps. So whether, a big trend obviously is moving things into the cloud. And it's, some people do just lift and shift it. So and then start to transform it. Some are, just starting right with a net new to move and take advantage of the new technologies. You need to take advantage of progressive delivery techniques and feature flags, but you're still also are maintaining this your core business. So still like 70% of things are on-prem these days. It depends on the sector, it depends on your company, but more and more it'll be hybrid cloud, it'll be multi-cloud. And so digital transformation is the driver to make a business more what people expect, I guess, but behind the scenes, we're having to redo our tooling, redo our architectures, and build in, platforms that are there for the future as we deliver more and more.
Thanks. I think that actually leads into another question that I see in here for it. You were mentioning earlier in the talk for AIOps, and it's is that one of the trends you're seeing in the space?
I think it's a trend. So you hear a lot of different people talk about AI, and you hear people talk about machine learning. So and it's confusing. So I think, so for one, machine learning is a very different category than what Dynatrace does. So machine learning is more about models and feeding it data and having it calculate out certain scenarios. It's very different than so Dynatrace is a purpose-built AI engine to take real-time metrics, real-time, determining of events and time series data against a topology model with a causation engine. So there is a sort of a natural correlation of this relates to that, but that's through a topology model. But we also, a big part of our AI is a causation engine. So we know, hey, when you're having a failure rate on this service, what is it talking to? If it's talking to this other thing, what is happening on it? So if there's a cause and effect relationship through a gigantic database we have internally to the product, that's how we start to piece together these root causes. So it's purpose-built to aggregate huge volumes of data against a purpose-built topology model against high volumes of data to have that specific goal of root cause anomaly detection. And so that precise answer that you get then drives your remediation. So I know, like you saw in a simple problem card, but this is the root cause component. And by feeding that information to tools like this is the CI item, if you're managing things in a CMDB, we know the team, we can alert the team that's responsible for that. Or if we tied in the trigger or the event, we know what CD job did it, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really like, get the precise answer. That's going to drive your automation.
Thanks. And I see Cody has reappeared.
Well, we can probably keep talking all day, Cody. Yeah, this is I think we are running out of time though.
Yeah, we are at the top of the hour, but I do want to give each of you a chance if you have any parting words you'd like to leave our audience with before we go off the air.
Rob, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of covered it. I mean, all I could say is, Dynatrace, give it a shot. We have a full self-service trial. Everything I showed you, you can do it. There's guides for how to set up and start monitoring your applications. And then, we are a very mature company, built into our product. We have chats, so you can easily get help. to get started. And then with LaunchDarkly, I'll let you kind of talk about that a bit, but the integration is there. That's very easy to set up and configure to be able to do what we showed today. So
I'll do it. Sure. I know we have the trial link in the handouts, but I know we're at the top of the hour. So Cody, I'll hand it back to you.
Awesome. Well, Rob and Daniel, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us. I know this last 60 minutes has just been packed with info, so I really appreciate all the work that goes into it.
Thanks for having us.
So just as a reminder to our audience, this session was recorded, so you will receive an email with a link to access this recording on demand, or you can find the recording living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars, and then just be sure to look in the on-demand section. So we do still have those 4 $25 Amazon gift cards to give away. Our winners are Sanjeev S., Diana M., Adrian B., and Emily H. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. But if you don't happen to see that email, please do check your spam folder. I'd like to thank AWS and LaunchDarkly for sponsoring today's program. And to everyone in attendance, thank you so much for spending the last hour with us. We really respect your time, and we just want to ask for one more minute for a survey that will pop up as soon as we close out. Otherwise, we do hope to see everyone at an upcoming Techstrong Learning program. Everyone, have a great rest of your day. And Rob, Daniel, thank you both so much.